Oh yeah, and I think that's a great part about the Sinclair method is it seems to really target many versions of drinking, right? Some people are heavy daily drinkers, some people are just binge drinkers here and there, but I just think like how it works and it's very, very strong. And it definitely worked for me as being a heavy drinker every day. And it's really just that the miracle of like having that off switch again, like, one of the things I'm working on right now is just breaking the habit. I'm definitely not at extinction yet, but I feel the internal change happening.
Well, welcome everybody. This is Katie Lane with Thrive Alcohol Recovery, and I'm back again today with a Sinclair Method success story. I have with me today Tara. And Tara, just want to first of all say welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a huge fan, so excited to be here.
Well, it's so cool that you mentioned that, the podcast and the videos have been helpful for you. So I'm excited to have you here. Now this podcast and interview is going to be helpful for others going forward. So thank you for taking time to chat. I wanted to start because whenever I do an interview with somebody, I ask them questions just so I understand a bit more about their story. And I was telling Tara, like, what she wrote about her Sinclair Method journey with what she shared with me was just so inspiring and beautifully written that I wanted to kick off the interview by reading this. And then we're going to dive into your story. So she says, "It's been a true miracle for me. Before, I had no control over alcohol and would start as early as possible and drink until basically I passed out or got really tired. There were so many nights I don't remember, so many mornings I woke up feeling terrible. I tried abstinence many times and failed, only getting to a week or so and caving. I would feel so ashamed and guilty and like everyone wonder what's wrong with me. I joined the Sober Mom Facebook group and someone mentioned the Sinclair method to me. After looking it up, it was like a light bulb went off, and I finally had hope that I could do this. From day one, it changed my relationship with alcohol immediately and just kept getting better. It's hard to explain, but I feel like an internal change happening. And sometimes when I'm drinking, I don't even really enjoy it all that much, which is so wild to think about. I never wanted to be abstinent, but to be able to moderate and TSM has helped me do exactly that. It's so liberating knowing I have control now, and I'm so much happier and try to share my story whenever I can to help others." So that's a little bit about Tara's background, her drinking, learning about TSM, and I'm excited to just dive into your story, Tara. So I like to
Oh,
start
thank
at
you.
the will you tell us the beginning? I think so much of what you said in there people can relate to where we're drinking, it's out of control, we're wondering what's wrong. It seems like the harder we try, the worse it gets. So many people can relate with that. So let's go back to the beginning. Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about your relationship with alcohol and history and where it started and how it kind of started to get to a place where it felt like you were losing control.
Sure. Yeah. So I was actually a pretty good kid. I didn't drink alcohol until I was almost 21 years old. So I know that's probably weird, unfortunately, this day and age, but I didn't really have a history with it growing up. Like I said, I was almost 21, I think a few months before my 21st birthday, and I had my first drink. But it started out just like many other people, drinking in college on the weekends. It's a Friday, Saturday. That's kind of just what you do. And I think that's the part I miss the most about, back in those days is like you didn't even think about really drinking during the week. It was just something you did on the weekends. So, but yeah, just drinking with friends on the weekends. And then I went to grad school. So I went to a notoriously drinking culture grad school. So, Friday and Saturday night kind of turned into an all weekend kind of thing when I was at grad school. But, fast forward to being an early adult, I started getting into wine culture. That's just kind of what you're expected to do as an early adult, having a casual glass here and there, going out to happy hour with coworkers. So, that sustained for a few years and then getting into more of the wine, it's something you do with food, right? So I would think, oh, well, now I have to have it daily with dinner. I'm having pasta here, so of course I have to match this wine, and then, beef over here, so I have to have a dark red. But, that turned into daily drinking, still doing binge drinking sometimes on the weekends with friends. So, just kind of escalating, gradually. And I remember it was a very pivotal moment when I was 25 years old because I became pregnant with my son. So, I stopped no problem. And that's how I know I wasn't physically dependent then. But I remember feeling this sense of relief because I could see myself really forming that bad habit of daily drinking. So it was kind of like a relief, like, oh, I'm pregnant. I can take a huge break from drinking. And, maybe when I come back after I have my son, I can go back to do more of like the social drinking aspect because I kind of saw it starting to become a problem, just more habitual, not physically dependent, but yeah. So after I had my son, I was never diagnosed, but I did feel a little bit of postpartum depression. And it's really the only time in my life that I think I used alcohol as an escape. My husband would come home and I'm like, I need to check out. I Mom's off the clock right now. Like, I'm gonna escape and come back tomorrow. So, my plan to just socially drink didn't really happen like I had thought about it. So I did that for 6 months. I stayed home with him for 6 months, and I did go back to work after 6 months, which was great for my mental health. One of my big mistakes. I wish I would have went back sooner, but rather than doing the whole plan of, oh, I'm only gonna, drink socially, I started right back into that routine of drinking daily, hanging out with friends on weekends, and unfortunately, started back into that routine again. So, the routine of 1 to 2 glasses per day gradually turned into, over many years, 1 to 2 bottles per day. And then, before TSM, it was getting really bad. And I didn't even track it. I didn't even want to know. But just to give people like kind of a data point, it could be many boxes of wine per week. So I knew, okay, this is not good. This is out of control now. I don't have an off switch. I was like, in my bio there, I started drinking early, basically didn't stop until, I either went to bed or passed out. So, yeah, it started getting really out of control. So, and, for the past 5 years or so, I was really torturing myself with this whole like trying abstinence. Luckily, I was one of the few. I didn't have a rock bottom moment, but I could definitely see myself that train going down that track. Right? It's a lot of. It's not a matter of if; it's just a matter of when. So I knew I had to get the reins and get that train turned around before it got bad. Um, but
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can just absolutely, put myself in the situation you're in as someone who is drinking tons and tons of wine every week, and I don't know about you, but I wanted to ask because I was definitely hiding it from my husband, and I know you mentioned to
oh
me,
yeah.
earlier, my husband was like, "Oh, I didn't realize how bad your drinking problem was." So what was that like with your husband? Like, what did he think about your
Yeah.
drinking?
Well, yeah, it's amazing you mention it, and I think probably for a lot of us high functioning people, we hide it really well. It's amazing. Like, none of my coworkers, none of my family, even my husband, when I told him I wanted to start the Sinclair Method and breaking down and like saying like I need to stop drinking, I think he was partially surprised because he's like, well, you seem like, it's not really affecting your life much, is it? And I'm like, screaming inside, like, I can't remember most of my evenings. I wake up in the morning feeling absolutely terrible. I can't exercise like I want to because I'm hungover. Just the routine. I mean, I had the routine down. I took a big glass of water up to bed every evening, waking up, knowing I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and chug it, and then, feel my heart racing, not being able to sleep for the next hour. So, I'm glad, I guess, for everyone on the outside, I hit it well, but inside I was just like really, yeah, I was really struggling and I needed a change. So he's super supportive. He was supportive, but I think it was surprising to him on just how much internal struggle I was going through.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you speak to that internal struggle because it really is like we are beating ourselves up. We're asking ourselves, why are we doing this? We're both loving and looking forward to that wine ritual every night, but then hating ourselves the next morning and committing that this is a
Yes.
different day. But gosh, that is such a torturous place to be. And I know many people listening will be able to relate with that. So it sounds like your drinking was just kind of escalating from your early 20s and it got worse like the last 5 years before TSM. So, all in all, how long were you struggling for, ballpark, until you went on TSM?
I would say for a good 5 years, I mean, like, really struggling. I think, back when I knew I had maybe to cut back, I kind of told myself, like, "Well, it's not really affecting my job, and it's not really affecting, what I'm doing. Yes, I should cut back, for health reasons, but it's not really a problem, right?" And it was really just in the last 5 years when it went from, the few glasses to the few bottles a day. I'm like, okay, I don't have control anymore. I can't have an off switch. I remember a very vivid memory in those 5 years where we were going to go ride ATVs with our friends. And I had found like a wine store on the way there to stop at, on Google Maps or whatever. And I had planned that out because we were going to go there to their cabin and ride ATVs. And lo and behold, when we got there, it's like, in the middle of nowhere. So there's nothing else around. It was closed. And Google Maps was wrong. It said it was open and it was closed. And I remember having this like incredible anger come over me and thinking like, how am I going to even have fun today? Because I don't have wine that I planned on. And I didn't bring any with me. And it was just, like after an hour had passed and my anger went away, I'm like, what is going on? Why am I so obsessed with this? Why does that have such a big impact to me? And that's when I'm like, okay, there's something else going on here. It is a problem.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I've been in similar situations like that. I'm so thankful you speaking to that because again, that's that internal torture, that dialogue we're going
Yeah.
through where, a normal person would be like, "Okay, no big deal. Like I guess we're not going to get
Yeah.
wine." But with the AUD brain, it's like we got to have it. And if we're not having it,
Yes.
I would feel that anger, that panic, that frustration, that annoyance, almost like let's drive 20 miles in the other direction to find the next open store.
Exactly. Yeah, we have to go back home. We can't do the ATV ride today. It's
Yeah.
like it's so sad.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, it's so true. Um Okay, so had you tried other things before TSM to kind of set rules? I heard you in your when you filled out your bio that you did were in a sober Facebook group. So what were you trying before TSM to get this issue under control?
Oh yeah, definitely the abstinence model, right? I mean, that's kind of the go-to. And I've tried it all. I told myself like I'm only going to drink on weekends, of course, and then, make it to Tuesday or Wednesday, and that didn't work. Tried dry January, sober October, would either make it a few weeks or, make it through the whole phase, but then that next day when it's game on, I would just go hard and then think, why did I even bother? It's like, yeah, it didn't really do anything in the long run. I've tried a lot of it. You'll hear it's just like it's willpower. Just all you need to do is read Quitlet. So I read Quitlet and I wrote myself letters, and some of them really emotional. A lot of us do that, the next morning when we're filled with that guilt and shame. And I wrote a really emotional one to myself, and I read that every morning, and that, kept me sober for 2 or 3 weeks. But then that lizard brain's back, like, hey, that was just that one time, we can moderate, right? And it's like, okay. But just after now that I'm on TSM, I kept setting myself up for failure over and over again and feeling that guilt and shame. And now that I'm on TSM and I understand the science, it's like, okay, I was setting myself up for failure this entire time because, it's really much more than that. It's not just, willpower. I mean, kudos to people who can do it, that's great, but I know personally for me, my neural pathways were so conditioned to get that alcohol as a reward system that, I was obsessive. Either I was obsessed with not drinking because I couldn't have it, or I was obsessed with when I could and how much I was drinking that day. So, yeah, definitely the abstinence model I've tried so many times over the years, and it's really why I joined the Facebook group in the first place, because I was looking for different inspiration or different methods that I haven't tried yet. And talking about how I heard about the Sinclair method, I did join that Facebook group, and I think I posted anonymously, like, what else can I try? Like, I tried everything that I can think of. Like, somebody please, like, recommend something. I was hoping for a miracle. And thankfully, somebody did respond on my comment, and they're like, "Hey, have you ever heard of the Sinclair method? That might be something you want to try." So I mean, the answer to that is no, I've never heard of that. And really, I jumped in headfirst. I got The Cure for Alcoholism by Roy Escapa. I watched the One Little Pill documentary. I watched all of Claudia's videos. I listened to your podcast, Katie, and then it was just like I said in my bio, this light bulb went off. Like, oh my goodness, how is this not like just the first thing everyone tries? This is a miracle. So yeah, it was it was really through that Facebook group. I'm so happy it happened, and somebody posted on how I could find TSM.
Oh my absolutely. It's such a shame that I think the majority of people who get on this method learn about it by happenstance. Like, oh, this random
Yes.
person told me about it, or I saw it in a Facebook group, or I read an article. It's not like the first thing that they've tried. I wanted to ask because you just described so well the struggle we go through when we have alcohol use disorder and like the mental gymnastics to moderate or abstain or, all the work that goes into that. So, would you say in hindsight you were experiencing what the cure for alcoholism and Dr. Sinclair described as the alcohol deprivation effect, where you can quit drinking, be sincerely motivated and sincerely mean it that you want to change, but then the craving just becomes overwhelming and you can't help but give into it? Can you talk about that experience?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And when I read that, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is why I can't do this. Like, it made so much sense, because I think we beat ourselves up a lot. Like, you just aren't strong enough. You don't have enough willpower. But when you learn about the science and like that deprivation effect, absolutely. And I think that's why I could go strong for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And then again, like, it's almost like a switch changes, and then your inner voice that was keeping you there for the 2 or 3 weeks just kinda goes away, and then this other voice comes in like, "Hey, what are you doing? Like, this isn't how we're supposed to do things." So, yeah, when I read that and learned about that, it made so much more sense, and then I felt a sense of relief too. It's like, "Okay, maybe it's not just me being a failure. Maybe it's not me just, like, not being strong enough. There's something else behind the scenes at work here." And absolutely, I felt that 100%.
Yeah, and to your point about just feeling like a failure, like, I've been an advocate in this space since 2017, since this treatment also changed my life. And I just feel like our current treatment system of abstinence and willpower, and like, again, some people can do it, but if you look at the data, a lot of people can't. And I just remember
Mhm.
going through a similar struggle as you, where I would read these quit lit books or listen to sober podcasts, and they were able to stay sober, but I was missing like the how, because that
Yeah.
torturous craving would come back. And like, I'm like, well, how do you get through that? And I just feel like that's not talked about very much in sober communities. I mean, it is talked about, okay, take it one day at a time and how to like,
Mhm.
combat your triggers and stuff. But for me, it became like, I don't care if I sabotage my life. Like, I need a drink. And I know that wasn't the real me. That was like my hijacked brain. But
Right?
yeah, I don't know if you wanna comment on that at all. I just feel like it's not something that's talked about in traditional treatment or traditional sober communities. It's just like kind of willpower,
No.
make it happen, you can do it, just think about how much better life is gonna be. Alcohol's so bad for you. It's like all these things are true and logical, but like the ADD brain is completely illogical, and it's much deeper than
Yes.
that.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and it's so strong, right? Yeah, it's almost like they really want like a mind over matter, like, you're feeling all these things, just ignore them, just move past them. And I think, luckily some people can do that, but for some of us there has to be another way. It's just physically impossible. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's jump into your TSM journey. So we're recording this in February of 2025. When did you start the Sinclair method? And tell us about kind of your early days on the treatment. What was your response? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I joined the Facebook group, I think it was in July, and I started TSM in August of 2024. So just, like a half a year ago. And thankfully, because I had done a lot of research about it before I started, I knew what to expect, some of the side effects that are common with people, some of the recommendations on how to get your body used to the naltrexone medication. So I started out with a half a pill and I actually stayed on that for a month. I know that's not, always the recommended, but I tend to be easily like feeling dizzy. So that was definitely like my major side effect. But so I stayed on it a half for a month and it still worked wonders. But yeah, the first day I took it, I think I had, oh, it's probably like 3 drinks. And I just remembered towards the third drink, I'm like, I guess I'll go to bed now. And then the second day, I wasn't really thinking about what was going on. But then the second day, I was, on my second drink and I literally looked down at my glass of wine and I'm like, I don't even want this. And then I'm like, what is going on? What is this magic that's happening right now? Because, just a few days ago, I would have never been able to stop at 2. I would have went as far as I could until, I went to sleep or passed out. So it just really clicked in my brain like, okay, this is different than what I've experienced before. So luckily I was, known as what they call a fast responder, right? So I noticed immediately like it changed my relationship with alcohol. And it's been crazy because after that I've had some ups and downs, but really, after my second drink I'm pretty much done now. And I it's just so liberating. So yeah, it's nice to be a fast responder, but I know not everybody is as lucky as that.
Yeah, but I mean, there are people who are fast responders. And something I've learned from a doctor mentor of mine is typically it seems like the people who respond more quickly drink more for reward. And that's not always true. But like
Mhm.
he says, when you have your first couple of drinks, before naltrexone, you get really excited and you're already thinking about the third, fourth, fifth, and so on. Would you describe your drinking like that? Or was it more like relief style? Or was it both? Because it can be both.
Oh, yeah, no, I would get so excited to have my first, and then after my first, I would get so excited to have my second and third. So, yeah, I totally feel that comment. It was definitely I feel very reward based. It wasn't I didn't ever drink much for like emotions or whatever, like kind of I described during my pregnancy and after my pregnancy I did for a little bit, but it was really like physical reward. Like it felt like kind of like a like you have an itch and you finally scratch and you're like, "Yes, this is great. This is how I gotta keep going." And then unfortunately I would keep going. So
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and I appreciate that you spoke to what you needed to do with the half a tablet and staying there because as a coach, my view, and obviously I use naltrexone, there's no rush to get to the full dose. I even work with people who never
Mhm,
went up from the 25. So I think that's important that you and your doctor tailor it to what works for you because I've seen
mhm.
people trying to like force themselves to get up to the full dose faster than they're ready to. And like, what's the point in that if it's just making you feel ill? So it's awesome to hear that you were able to kind of have that knowledge, gradually work up, yet still see the effect at the 25 milligram dose.
Yeah, and it's I think it's unfortunate too because I think a lot of people when they try naltrexone for the very first time, a lot of them go, full bore into 50 milligrams. And if you do have a lot of adverse side effects, I think unfortunately it probably discourages a large amount of them from continuing naltrexone when, if they would have just gradually worked their way up, they could have been much better off and, had a lot of success with it. So definitely, recommending starting low and building up, but yeah, I did experience some side effects, but they went away after a few weeks, thankfully. So, and now, I take naltrexone 50 milligrams, no problem, and have no side effects at all.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. That is something I get messages or comments from people who say, "Oh, I tried it and it made me so sick. I'm never taking it again." But to your
Mm,
point, it's typically they're not titrating up. Maybe they're not having it with a meal. So I think that's so
exactly.
important. I wish that was more common knowledge. But if you go to your
Yeah.
general doctor, they don't know, and they'll, oh yeah, go ahead and take it. So it
Yeah.
happens. But the good news, like you did, most people adjust with the side effects. So if you're willing to
hmm
endure for a bit the discomfort, it can get better.
Yes, definitely.
So you mentioned, I mean, clearly you were a fast responder, and it's interesting to me because I also sometimes get comments from people like, "Oh, this wouldn't work for someone who had a real alcohol addiction. Like, this is just for the person who maybe drinks too much once in a while, kind of thing." But I mean, you were drinking quite a bit of alcohol, being, a couple of boxes a week. I know you mentioned before we hit recording, like sometimes it would be up to like multiple bottles of wine in one day. I mean, that's a large
hmm
quantity of alcohol that your body had been used to, but I mean, you responded pretty quickly to where almost right away you started to become more of a moderate drinker. Do you want to speak a little bit about, that change and in your view, like, can this work for someone who has a real dependence on alcohol? Not necessarily physically dependent where it's sending you into withdrawal, but I mean, like, this was a
hmm
very ingrained daily habit you had that it was hard to go without, and you were drinking a lot of alcohol.
Oh yeah, and I think that's a great part about the Sinclair method is it seems to really target many versions of drinking, right? Some people are heavy daily drinkers, some people are just binge drinkers here and there, but I just think like how it works and it's very, very strong. And it definitely worked for me as being a heavy drinker every day. And it's really just that the miracle of like having that off switch again, like, one of the things I'm working on right now is just breaking the habit. I'm definitely not at extinction yet, but I feel the internal change happening. Sometimes when I'm drinking, like we said in the bio, I'm not really even enjoying it much anymore. And that's how I know something's happening. I'm not getting that reward. And a lot of times I'll just stop drinking wine and switch to tart cherry juice or a seltzer. Or now my new routine is really, I love having nighttime tea. And it's just, yeah, it's such a relief. So going from having that much alcohol every day and just having it, 1 to 2 glasses a day, most days, sometimes alcohol free days, it's so liberating to not have to worry about it. My goal was never to be abstinent, but really just have control and not have to obsess over if I'm drinking or not drinking. How much am I drinking? TSM's really given me the power and control now. I'm in charge. Um, Alcohol's not in charge of me anymore. I have an off switch and I can definitely feel, it even getting progressively better as time goes on. So I'm not at extinction yet, but I think I'm probably about 80% of the way there.
Oh, that's awesome. Maybe you can relate with this, but if someone's struggling with drinking and they can't imagine what it's like to have an off switch, which I know you and I both know what that's like, how would you describe what the off switch is like with naltrexone and TSM? Like, you talk about these internal changes. Like, can you do kind of a
Mhm.
compare and contrast? Maybe like what specifically is different in you to where you can have one or two glasses and call it a night as opposed to one or two bottles?
Well, definitely, like, the first time it happens, it's shocking because you 'cause you're not even, like, understanding what's going on. Like, yeah, it's that doesn't happen, right? It's like there is no off switch, and all of a sudden now you're just drinking your 2nd glass, and you just genuinely don't want it anymore, and it's so hard to describe because, before TSM, I wouldn't even know what you're talking about, I could never understand that my husband, he's a big whiskey drinker, but he has no problem like not drinking or just stopping after one, and I could never even understand people like that. And now on TSM, it is an off switch. Like I'm drinking my 2nd drink and I go to take the next sip and it's like, I don't really want this anymore. And it's a very weird feeling at first. And yeah, I think I was kind of shocked at the first time it happened. Like, what is going on? My brain's so confused right now. I don't want this. So yeah, it's just really, yeah, you just genuinely don't want it anymore. And I don't know how else to say it. And it's very weird when it happens the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes like this satiation point. I always described it like, I eat a
Yeah.
big piece of chocolate cake and it's yummy and delicious and I'm glad I had it, but like I don't want another big piece of chocolate cake. Like I'm good, and
So
it
yeah.
yeah. Um, so you mentioned, okay, so it's been about 6 months on the method and you said there has been some ups and downs, but for the most part you've been a pretty fast responder. So can you speak to maybe what some of those ups and downs have been for you?
Yeah, so I definitely went through what we call the honeymoon period where, I was sailing along just great, only having one or two glasses here and there until about 2 months in. I never went back up to my normal levels because it was honestly very excessive. But I did go up to, like having like a bottle a night or whatever, a little bit of an increase, but then I would come back down and it kind of cyclical like that. And now, ever since I'd probably say December is when I've really started incorporating a lot of, alcohol-free days. And they're getting easier and easier, thankfully, as I go. And I did think about attempting dry January. I called it drought January, not completely dry, but mostly dry. So I did pretty good the month of January, and again, I'm really starting to now that the physical part of it's going down, I'm trying to work on more of like the habitual, like that 5 o'clock dinner time kind of habit that I have, like just, oh, a glass of wine sounds nice right now. Luckily, again, like to your point, yeah, I feel satiated after the first one and can stop or one or two, but yeah, just working on breaking that habit a little bit more and incorporating more alcohol-free days is really my next step in my journey.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I don't know, but sometimes that can be the harder part for people, especially those of us who are daily
Yes,
drinkers. Like that 5 o'clock, even if we don't really feel like drinking, it's like, well, it's what we do. It sounds nice enough anyway. So, what are some
exactly.
practical things you're doing to break the habits, if you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yeah, so it's funny because I feel like when I eat first, I don't want to drink as much or at all. So I think like yeah, I've incorporated like trying to eat dinner and then tell myself I can have a glass of wine if I want to, right? So and a lot of times after that, I'm just like meh, I don't really feel like it. I'll have a brownie or something, and then with the habit, I'll drink tart cherry juice and seltzer, but put it in my wine glass because it's just like I like holding the glass. I like, doing that with watching TV or whatever. So like part of the habits there, I'm just trying to switch out the stuff in the cup basically. So just doing little tweaks like that, trying to just replace one habit with another. Again, I'm drinking tea. I actually got an advent calendar for January to try dry January. So there was like a different tea that I could try each night. So that really helped me have something to look forward to besides wine at night. So just little things like that. But I think, just getting to a point where, yeah, to your point, it's like the 5 o'clock itch, like this is what we do. Yeah, trying to replace that with some other liquid that I enjoy a lot or activity that I enjoy a lot.
Yeah, that's great, and I think that's really what it's about is these little changes, and, before naltrexone, you hear these kind of mindfulness drinks, "Oh, put a different drink in your wine glass," but for me, it was never effective because I was just craving
No.
alcohol still, but with naltrexone, it's like, "Oh, these things actually work because my craving is so much less." Would you agree with that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, this was a tactic I tried, when I was practicing abstinence, and yeah, it definitely didn't hit the same. Now it's like, now that the cravings have gone down and I don't feel like, drinking every day. I'm just, it's much more effective now that my brain has kind of calmed itself down. Those neural pathways have gotten much weaker. It's much easier for me now to actually take those kinds of tools and put them to use and have them be effective.
Yeah, incredible. Tara, something I wanted to ask you, since you're a mom, because I'm not a mom, but I hear from parents sometimes, both moms and dads, they'll tell me, oh, my work is so busy and I get home and the wine is just my like time to myself, the me time. I deserve it. Like it's the way I cope with the chaotic household and helping my kids with homework, all of these stressors that come with being a parent. Was
Hmm.
that something that you had to kind of navigate through to change habits? I know you mentioned you weren't really drinking to cope, but I imagine, there are some pretty significant changes if you're not drinking as much as you were before. How has that impacted parenting? Kind of, yeah, speak to that. How are you navigating that?
Yeah, so one of the great things about not being hungover in the morning is I can actually meet my exercise goals now. I've actually lost 65 pounds in the last year or so. So
Wow.
it's yeah, I know it's been long overdue. But really finding that stress relief through exercise has been so helpful, both like physically and mentally. And it's really taken the place of like trying to look for wine for that kind of comfort and relief. Now I just like busted my butt on the treadmill. I have a Peloton and it's like changed my life in that way too. But before TSM, I would always just be so hungover. I never got the benefits from exercise because I would always just feel terrible. So now that I can, have the off switch, wake up the next day, get on the treadmill, exercise, it's really, really helped with my stress and, just journaling too. I've started doing that as well, and yeah, both of those things have really helped a lot to where I haven't had to look so much towards alcohol as sort of that relief at night.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. What's amazing is that, naltrexone can really show us how much our drinking is done out of habit. As that craving quiet downs and we see ourselves kind of doing it anyway because it's a habit, that becomes more obvious. And what I love about our brains is it loves to learn other habits. So it sounds like what you're doing is like, yes, you're drinking on naltrexone, but you're also implementing these other behavior changes, if you will. And it sounds like that's starting to become a habit, and you're reaping the rewards from it. And when we experience that, I mean, it just motivates us to do it more and more. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah, and definitely like with part of the Sinclair method is not taking naltrexone on your off days, right? So those rewards of other activities are just so much more strong and you get so much more of a reward from things like exercise, and it just really kind of comes full circle and how the whole method works together. It's really great.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Your brain is ripe for learning on those days. So if you're doing that hardcore exercise, man, you're getting all the endorphins, and
Yep.
then you go drink and you don't get the same reward. Your brain's like, "Huh, okay, well alcohol's not as fun
Yeah,
as it used to be. Maybe I prefer other things."
exactly. Yep.
So, what was challenging for you, particularly, if you could say one or two things about your Sinclair method journey, like whether it's emotionally, mentally, habitually, what could you speak to that was the challenging piece of the journey?
Well, I mean, just to start off, my biggest challenge was actually getting naltrexone itself. So I did ask my doctor for it after I found out about the method, and she was really hesitant to prescribe it to me. She kind of dismissed and deferred me to, an addiction specialist. But it's like, no, I really want to try this method. I really think it's going to work. So thankfully, we live in an information era where things like TSM is discoverable and ways to get naltrexone is. So I'm working with an online service with a physician, and they're really great and have been helpful. But yeah, that's honestly the biggest challenge I've faced. The method itself is pretty straightforward and it's worked amazingly, but just getting a hold of the naltrexone, for me was one of the major challenges to starting TSM.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. That's still a challenge. It was the same for me. I could not get a prescription, and a lot has changed since 2017. There are online providers now in all 50 states, and that
Yes.
wasn't the case back then. But I'm so glad that that's changing, because I tell people it's a 50-50 chance. Your doctor may be on board and totally willing, or they may refuse it, which it just feels terrible when you like finally talk to your doctor about your drinking and they're
Yes.
like, nope, not gonna help.
Oh, I know. And it's funny now because, after I've seen her a few times afterwards and I've just expressed to her how much, it's helped me. And I've really explained the Sinclair method and even recommended, having their office get the book. And, now she's totally on board. She's she's really supportive and totally on board, just seeing how it's helped me. And now she's recommending it to others. So I'm just so thankful that, even though it was a challenge for me, hopefully, having brought her up to speed on this method will help others much easier.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, I got chills. That is so cool that I mean, you didn't have to do that. You're continuing to be this advocate, and who knows how many people she's going to be able to help now. That's really cool. So, you kind of talked a little bit about how your life has changed since starting TSM, the weight loss, exercise, and things like that. I find when we drink a lot, it just has a ripple effect into so many areas of our lives. Like you talked about the hangover, you're not exercising, just this vicious cycle. So, what is the ripple effect change of drinking less? Like, I know you've lost weight, you're exercising more. What else has changed for the better in your life since going on TSM?
Well, I'm definitely saving so much money by not buying all of the wine I used to. It's just it's shocking, like, to think about how much, I've spent, and I have, like, an app, that says how many drinks that I had and how much I used to spend, and I'm just looking at it like, "Oh my goodness, that could go towards a lot of other things like vacations," and so yeah, definitely, saving a lot of money, not drinking wine, definitely meeting all of my health goals. Instead of drinking so much wine, I actually drink water now. That's another health goal of mine that I've been struggling with for many, many years, is trying to get my water quota in because I never had time for it. I always had alcohol to think of, and, just not waking up dehydrated in the middle of the night. That's something I almost forget how bad it was. And I know a lot of people go through this, but just waking up in the middle of the night with my heart pounding because that cortisol is trying to overcompensate for all of the alcohol that I just ingested. And that was my life for so long. And now, I mean, if anything, I have to wake up and use the bathroom in the middle of the night because I'm too hydrated. So it's just a total 180 that went around. So and I just find myself, like, finding beauty in other little things. I know that sounds corny, but, just looking at a sunset and just being amazed by how beautiful it is. And I think it's because, when we're drinking so much, everything's so numb and gray that we don't really get to see it for what it is. And it just, yeah, just little things like that. Everything's just so much more apparent, and my feelings have just been so much more apparent, and, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? I don't escape as much either. So I have to work through things and work through mental challenges and the stress and whatnot. But just finding healthier ways to do that, but then also just seeing the beauty in little things that I was kind of blinding myself with before.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds corny, but I'm over here like nodding my head because I had the exact same experience, and I remember one time going on a nature walk after I'd been on TSM for a while, and usually I would bring like a whiskey drink and a thermos on this walk,
Hmm.
and so I'd be drunk.
Yup.
Um, and I was sober that day, and I saw this beautiful flower that smelled so good, and I just started crying because I was like, haven't even noticed this flower for years because I've been drunk, but you just become so much
Yes,
more sensitive to your environment. And I
you
don't know, I feel like
do.
the excessive drinking blocked me of my joy. Like, I could be happy and
Yes.
buzzed, but, like, to be truly joyful because the sunset is beautiful, like you said,
Yes.
it's a whole other level of feeling your feelings, which
And
that's
gratitude. Yeah, it's amazing.
yeah, you feel alive and grateful to be alive.
Exactly.
Well, you mentioned, the coping and having to learn to cope in different ways because you're not numbing as much. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that is a challenge for a lot of people, especially if they've been relying on alcohol for a really long time. How did you go about that?
Yeah, it's funny because, yeah, most of mine is physical dependence, but, when you're drinking, everything gets kind of numb. So, I'd find myself like snapping and getting angry when I shouldn't have been, like stupid arguments that I probably didn't have to have with my husband that used to occur just because I was drinking and not in the right frame of mind. So, now when I have a stressor like that. Again, exercise has been a huge help, but journaling, really paying attention to my feelings, trying to think of, strategically how I want to move forward in a situation. With alcohol, I used to just kind of zone out, and the problem doesn't ever go away, right? It's still there when you come back, and it just kind of kicks the bucket down the road. And I found myself being a lot more confident in facing some of those challenges head on. It's the only way to go around it is through it, so let's just do it, you know? So I've found a new sense of confidence and bravery, to just kind of face it head on. And I think TSM's helped a lot with that because, just having it change my life how it has, now I have control over alcohol. What else can I have control over that maybe I didn't think I had before? So just some of those little, strategies and just that newfound confidence has really helped a lot.
Yeah, I'm appreciating that you're mentioning the confidence because for so many of us, I think the alcohol, like it can give us temporary confidence when we're buzzed or whatnot, but it just
Hmm.
robs us of our resilience and our confidence and our belief in ourselves, especially when we're, committing to go sober all week and then we drink on a
Yes,
Tuesday. It just like it shatters our resilience and our confidence. So to rebuild that through this process is such a beautiful part of this healing journey.
absolutely.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions for you before we wrap up.
Sure.
I was just curious to hear, uh, did you tell, I know you told your husband, but did you tell other friends or family? Have people noticed around you that your drinking is different? How did you approach that part of the method?
Yeah, so I have told a few close friends because, I definitely always have my naltrexone on me, just in case a occasion arises, or, I definitely want to wait the full hour, of course, before I drink. So if I show up to an event, where they're at, I definitely just let them know, my close friends, that like, yeah, I can have a drink in like 15 minutes or so, and they're very understanding of that. But just being a very high functioning person on the outside, not a lot of people have really noticed any difference. But it was kind of exciting because one of my girlfriends I went to school with, she joined the Sober Mom podcast, or sorry, the Sober Mom Facebook group. And not because of me, she's just doing it on her own. And just me sharing stories on there, she messaged me and she's like, oh my gosh, like I've never heard of the Sinclair method and I'm struggling too, and nobody knows about it. So we kind of have like this dialogue between the two of us, and we just share, a lot of real hard truths and regrets that we've had, and we both feel like we can't just openly explain it to everybody, but it's nice to find a friend that is really going through the journey with me. So I think that was a fun extra that I got out of it. But yeah, really just keeping it close family and friends. I unfortunately I'm such a warrior for this method that I want to shout it from the rooftop because it's, just my personality. That's how I am. But because of my role in my company, I deal with sensitive information. So unfortunately, I can't be as, open about it to everybody like I want to be, just for, my job security. But definitely, if you're on one of those Facebook groups, I'm low key annoying about how awesome the Sinclair method is. So people could probably put two and two together if they're listening to this on my true identity. But yeah, I try to share it at least anonymously as much as I can. And then personally with just, yeah, some close friends and family.
Yeah, I love that. It really is this grassroots effort. So, you don't have to go public completely with your story. You have your own little kind of area you're working on to raise awareness, which a lot of people are turning to those Facebook groups for help. So,
Hmm.
I hope that continues to, reach people in your form of your advocacy. So that's great. And let's see. I wanted to ask you, like socializing with this newfound relationship with alcohol. It sounds like you're still drinking
Yeah.
socially, but did anything change with that? Because sometimes people have fears like, oh, I can't imagine going to this function without drinking, or what has that part been like for you?
Oh, it's been amazing because I can just have one drink like everyone else now and be fine. So yeah, it's definitely given me that control back to where I can just go socially drink now. So it's a kind of a newfound freedom that I've discovered, through the TSM method, and it's just really just a breath of fresh air from what I used to be. But yeah, I don't dread going to any function now. I used to be nervous about, especially like company functions or things like that, where I knew I didn't have an off switch. It's almost the opposite of that now. I would actually avoid some gatherings because I knew I wouldn't have an off switch and I might embarrass myself or regret saying something to somebody. So I kind of, kind of held myself back from certain situations just because I knew I didn't have control. And now that I do, I'm super happy to go out there and socialize with people. And it's just such a relief to know that TSM has my back. I'm going to have one or two drinks and just literally feel done with it. And I'm not going to say anything stupid. I'm not going to get drunk in front of a bunch of people I shouldn't. It's been really great having that control back and yeah, not letting it control me. So for socializing, it's actually improved my life so much.
That's so good to hear, and again, back to that confidence, like, when you can trust yourself again with alcohol and you see yourself have a glass and then switch to tea or whatever, it's just like, "Wow, okay, this is such
Yeah.
it's such a good feeling."
And I used to be so jealous of those people. And now I am when it's crazy. Yeah, I used to watch people like spend like 30 minutes drinking one glass of wine and I'd look at them like unicorns, like what is going on? How are they doing it, you know? And now I'm that person. I just sip it and it's no big deal. So
Yeah.
it's yeah.
I know, I would be mystified by them as well. I'm like, "So do they not are they just practicing
Right.
self-control? Do they not have that obsessive chatter like everyone else?" Come to find out
Exactly.
that, yeah, they just have control. Alcohol is just, their
Yeah,
brain doesn't work like ours does.
exactly.
Well, this has been such an incredible conversation. As we wrap up, I wanna know, like, what advice or tips do you have for people who are on this journey or considering it based on your experience? What would you love to share with people?
I think, yeah, one of the big parts of the method, and I just can't stress this enough, is the compliance portion of it. Making sure you do take the naltrexone an hour before you drink. Back in my early days, I don't want to say experiment, but there were times where I would only wait 45 minutes, like every now and then, just because of like timing. And I actually felt myself getting set back. Like it would take me 2 weeks to work back up to where I was. So I only did that 2 or 3 times ever, and after doing it a few times, I'm like, "Do not get complacent, be compliant because it can set us back." Our brains are such powerful tools, and they'll jump right back to where they were. So yeah, definitely compliance is totally key. It's part of the method, and yeah, don't get complacent. It's a huge portion of it. The second one is tracking drinks. Like, I didn't really do that early on until I got into the method and joined some more Facebook groups that were more specific to TSM. But because the process is so not linear, it's amazing seeing everybody's charts with tracking drinks, and you can see that it's not linear, right? It goes up and goes down and goes up and goes down, and overall, it tapers off. But it's definitely not a linear experience. And once you can see that big picture and stand back, and even if it does take a long time, you can see that gradual decrease. I think that's really powerful. And that's helped me, become really excited about my journey and, reaching extinction. And then the third part, I think, is just spreading the word. Thanks to you, Katie, and people like you out there with podcasts and, Claudia with her documentaries. And I think, this is the era where everybody can really find out information from the horse's mouth and not have to listen to what we've been told in the past. I think it's just, really helping spread the word. If you know somebody who's struggling as well, definitely recommend them to all of these amazing, different podcasts, messages, documentaries. It's just really powerful. So I wanted to personally thank you, Katie, for helping spread the word and changing people's lives. It's been really a true miracle for me.
That's amazing. I mean, it's a real privilege for me because, like you, I just wanted to scream it from the rooftops when it was changing my life, and it I was like, "Am I gonna go public?" And I just did. Like, I guess I don't
Nice.
know. I didn't really think twice about it, but I think
Well, thank goodness you did.
yeah. Some of us are meant to, and a huge shout out to Claudia because I was like, I just remember thinking if she didn't tell her story, I would never know about this. So like, I can't keep
Right.
this a secret. Um,
Absolutely.
so thank you for sharing your story and also for just sharing kind of the foundational things because as a coach, I've met with people who are 6 months into TSM and they're not 100% compliant the whole time and they're wondering why it's not working. Maybe they just
Mm,
don't take it totally seriously because like you said, that 45 minutes, I have people who say, "Oh yeah, I'm compliant," but then come to find out they're only waiting 45 minutes or they're taking it with their first drink and it's like that is so
yes.
fundamental. It's called the golden rule for a reason. Like without that, it's just going to be an annoying process of not making a ton of progress. So Thank you for speaking to
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been such an awesome conversation, Tara. Thank you for taking time. I appreciate you being willing to share your story and being an advocate for TSM. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think if anybody's listening that, is curious about the method and hasn't tried it, I know I was a little bit, hesitant. I think we all are to change our lives, right? Alcohol is a huge part of who we are. And, it's hard to imagine life without it or just decreasing it. But honestly, just like everybody who's on the other side of sobriety or, overcome their challenges with alcohol, it's just so much more better and beautiful way of life. So, don't hesitate, jump in, and there's tons of resources out there. So anybody can, yeah, feel free to message people on the Facebook groups. Everyone's so helpful on those I've found, and yeah, best of luck to everybody on their journey.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Tara.
Thank you.